basically saying this is a legalistic kind of thing. There were a lot of loopholes and you had to have so much growth and all that kind of thing. But, the bottom line is that public policy and American politics depends upon the trust of the people with their elected officials. And the people voted, and I am convinced, to phase out the car tax. We passed a law that said that we were going to phase it out. We have phased out 47.5%. Now this year we're supposed to go to 70%. The money is already in the budget to do that. And we should not invade that for other purposes. We ought to use that to phase out the car tax to 70% this year.
The money's already in the budget. That is one of the biggest complaints that members of the Senate have. They say you're borrowing in order to put that money in the budget.
Just not true. The fact of the matter is it's just not true. What we are doing, as a matter of fact, is borrowing in order to free up some money for some capital projects which were being done with cash, and then using that cash in order to fill up holes that were left in the budget last year with increased spending. They made increased spending commitments last year, but with no funding in the budget in order to fund it. Now, what we need to do in a time of declining revenues, instead of trying to fund this out of future revenues, which this year didn't materialize the way we had hoped, instead, what we need to do is to go ahead now and bond some of these capital projects, free up some of the money, pay for last year's promises that were not made, kept in the budget, but don't go in there and invade this separate fund that's been set aside for the people on the car tax cut. That should be delivered to the people on the schedule appropriate. We've got to phase this thing out, and I'm sticking with it while I'm governor.
There's a lot of talk about a train wreck, that the Assembly won't come up with its own version of the budget to submit to you. If that happens, or if they submit one and you veto it, then what happens? If there's no budget proposal from the Assembly, then what happens?
Well, I prefer not to use all this hot language like train wreck and all those kinds of things. I prefer to address what's really going on here. And the question is there going to be an impasse between the House, which wants to go on and continue to phase out the car tax of 70%, and the Senate, which doesn't want to do that? Is there going to be an impasse? And I can find no rational reason why there needs to be an impasse. And I don't think there should be an impasse. And I don't want an impasse. I think we ought to have a budget, reasonable budget, that phases out the car tax to 70%, meets these other obligations. I mean, you asked a direct question, I'll give you a direct answer, and that is if there is no budget amendment passed this year, we revert back to the original budget. And the original budget does phase the car tax out at 70%. But on the other hand, we inherit all these holes in the budget that we were talking about, all these unfunded spendings that were done last year, and the governor will then have to go into the budget and find a way to fund them.
Of the borrowing that is going on that you just talked about, if it's not directly to pay for the car tax cut, is it made necessary because of continued cutting of the car tax?
Oh, I don't think so, unless you want to take the position that the commitment to the people now ought to be thrown in the trash and that we instead ought to take all that money and go spend it for increased spending. And I don't support that proposal. They've had increased spending, and they want to do even more increased spending this year. And so where are they going to get the money in a time where we had declining revenues? The answer is they want to go to the People's Fund for the car tax and get that. And I'm not in favor of that. I think we ought to stick with our promises and commitments to the people. And, Bruce, I will tell you this, and all the listeners out there, this is your chance to be a real participant in Virginia politics, in Virginia public policy. Call your senators. Not one senator in Northern Virginia is supporting the car tax reduction in this year's budget. Not one, except Bill Mims. He has, in fact, voted against the Senate's proposals to scale back the car tax cut. But no other senator is. They are all sticking with the reduced car tax cut, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think that we ought to stay with a full car tax cut, and the House is sticking with it. They're doing the right thing, but I'll tell you this, on the conference, Senator Colgan of Prince William County is on that conference. He should be called by the citizenry if they want the car tax to continue on. the Senate ought to be told exactly how the people feel about it.
Why is that the case in the Senate, not in the House of Delegates?
Well, I think the House of Delegates is running this year, and they understand that a pledge is a pledge and that the people expect their elected officials to keep faith and to keep trust. But they're also, I think, doing it not just because of the concern of elections, which I don't think is a bad problem, by the way. I think it's why we have elections. The public can have an opportunity to express themselves at the polls. But I also think that the House really believes that this is something that we can and should do. I've worked very closely. I've tried to work with the Senate. I have worked with the House. And the House has come up with a program to keep that pledge of the 70% phase out and do a lot of other creative and constructive things. Actually, the House didn't do it quite the way I did it, but they found a different way of doing it to stay on with the car tax cut.
There is more to come on the car tax, including your thoughts. If you'd like to participate with Governor Gilmore, it's 1-877-628-WTOP. Got a break here for traffic, and Stan Thomas in the WTOP Traffic Center. Investigation continues on 6.
You've just taken over leadership of the National Republican Party, and yet in the Senate of Virginia and opposing you on the car tax cut at 70% are some veteran Republican senators,
Sure.
men and women who've been in the party before it was fashionable and before you had majorities. So how do you explain that you've got this kind of opposition from within your own party?
Maybe it's because they were there before it was fashionable and before they had majorities. But the fact of the matter is that this is an opportunity, I think, for the Senate to take a position that they're going to be in control. And they've got to be in control, and I think that's what's really at work here. I'm not doing this because I have to be in control. I'm doing this because the people of Virginia voted for me to phase this car tax out. They voted for them to phase it out, too, and they voted for the House to phase it out, and we should keep our word and keep that social contract with the people.
How important is it to you in your new role as head of the Republican Party to see that that this budget goes through, that the 70% tax cut, that everybody is on board with you?
No, it's not important at all with respect to RNC. I was asked by the president to head up RNC and elected by the members of the Republican National Committee for several reasons. The president said he trusted me. He believed that we conducted our public policy correctly in Virginia. And he knew that I was in favor of broadening the base of the party and reaching out at the African-American community and the Latino community and adding people to our party. He liked the way that we'd been winning elections, and naturally, of course, the tax policy that we've been following did help us win elections in Virginia, continuously and relentlessly win elections in Virginia, because this is the voice of the people. That's what they want, and I think to turn around on them now is not good. It's not good public policy.
Does it say anything about the car tax reduction issue, that the opposition to continuing to cut the car tax comes from politicians who are not up for re-election? So it's really not an election year issue from them.
It might, Bruce. You can speculate on all this, but the House understands that when they go back to the people this year, that they want to be able to say they kept their word, and I think they would want to keep their word anyway. The Senate's not up this year, but I still believe that senators will listen to the voice of the people if they call. www.thedigitaldominion.com. And if you go to that website, you'll find who your senators are, and or at least their phone numbers, and you can give them a call, members of the public, if you care about this issue, and I hope you do.
You have something you want to take up with Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore? Now's your chance. The number's 1-877-628-WTOP. Got a break here for traffic and weather. Stan Thomas, the WTOP Traffic Center.
Oh, much better.
Welcome back to Ask the Governor here on WTOP Radio. Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore here today to answer your questions. Toll free, 1-877-628-WTOP. That's a free call for you, as it is on Star WTOP using Singular Wireless. Email questions by going to our website, WTOPnews.com. I'm Bruce Allen, along with WTOP reporter Mary Ann Jennings.
Governor, I want to stick with the budget and the car tax for just another question or two, and then I assure you we will get on to other items. But
Very fine.
you mentioned the fact that if there's no budget out of the General Assembly, that it then reverts to you and you have to handle the budget.
It reverts to the old budget, which is already law passed last year.
Right. But our revenues dipped, and you're going to have to make some cuts if the Assembly does nothing to the budget. It's the old budget. You're going to have to make some cuts.
You're going to have to do some spending reductions, that's for sure.
Where are they going to come? Where's it going to come from?
Well, I don't think we have to worry about that right yet. I think that the legislature ought to be able to reach a budget. I've shown them a way. I offered them an executive budget that not only kept faith with the people, but did a lot of additional constructive work, including on education, particularly on K through 12 education, to make sure kids are having this chance to have a fair shot at the SOLs. I put in a major package for construction on our campuses and colleges and universities across the state. And I found a way to do all that, and it was very much in line with everything that my predecessors had done in the governor's office. For some reason, the Senate this time just doesn't want to really adopt anything. The House has offered a different way of doing it. Then once they did that, then the Senate said, well, no, it's really not spending, it's debt. So I came in the other day and said, okay, I'll tell you what, if you take the money that's been found by both houses and you take the spending reductions that have been poured forward by both houses and you put it together, guess what? You can do this without debt. How about that? And they said, well, actually, it's not debt, it's spending. So it's back and forth. And, I believe that at the end of the day, the Senate is going to behave responsibly. I believe they are going to do something to make this work out and to not have an impasse, because I don't think an impasse is in the best interest of the people of Virginia. I think that the houses should come together and create a budget.
I do know, though, that there is a great deal of concern in the Senate about that budget reverting back to you, the original budget, because they are of the belief that there will be some pretty dramatic cuts. And I guess the reason I ask you about where you're going to look is it's all hand in hand, so people ought to know what to expect if there is no budget and it reverts back to you.
Well, let me be straight with you. If it reverts back to the old budget and then the governor has to administer on a budget that was passed last year without full funding, then I've got to find a way to fully fund it. And the law says that the governor does that. But I don't seek this, Mary. I'm not interested in doing that. That's why I offered an executive budget amendment this year, in order to make it all come out right and to keep it come out in the most responsible way and to keep the state moving ahead. No explanation has seriously been given as to why my executive budget has been rejected by the Senate. The House, didn't want to do exactly my way either, but they found a different type of approach, and I'm willing to certainly work with those budgets and see what we can do to make it happen. But this arbitrary no on the Senate side is intended, it seems, almost to create an impasse and throw the budget back onto the old budget. I'm not for that. I think that they can come together and they can break any impasse, and they can do a budget and keep the state moving ahead in a very responsible financial way.
Is this personality thing? Is it Mr. Chichester that it is controlling the budget? Is it a personality-driven thing, do you think?
Well, I hesitate to get personal at all. I've made a real point of not doing that. There's been a lot of shrill name calling, I think, in some of this session, but I'm trying to avoid doing any of that. I am reaching out to the people of Virginia and suggestions that they call the senators. I am doing that. I think that's a fair thing and a reasonable thing to do, and I think that some of the senators didn't appreciate that. But still, that's the democratic process here, and I certainly make no apologies for it. But I'm not calling anybody any names, and But I do think that the Senate wants to win this, and I think it's more important to put together a reasonable budget that keeps faith with the people, keeps the state moving ahead, than it is to do this the way the Senate's doing it.
Still on the subject of the car tax, a call here from Reston. Aaron, good morning. You're on with Governor Gilmore.
Yeah, good morning, Governor.
Good morning. Who's this?
This is Aaron.
Aaron, how are you?
Pretty good. To compliment you on your doggedness for the car tax. It's really
my dog, but that's okay.
he leads whether with his party or not. Within the
Well, that's right.
And I just had two questions really to that. One would be, why is the Senate adamant against it? My senator, thank you for the suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And the second, what is the future of it? The next governor, the successor. So I know you can't forecast who will be. What time do we see that taking in the future?
Well, the governor of Virginia only gets 1 4-year term, which I think is not smart in the modern world, but that's the way that we do things in Virginia. It ought to be changed, and every effort that's to give the governor 2 terms has been beaten back. But I think that my duty here is to finish this year with a 70% phase out, and then when I leave next year, the governor always makes the next 2-year budget, and right on time we'll be able to present a budget that will phase it out in the 5th year. And I think there's no reason why the new governor ought to want to change that. Once 70% is gone, I think the new governor will go ahead and follow the law and phase it at 100%, and then it will be gone forever. So that's what I anticipate happening. And again, the House feels this way, and I feel this way, and we have all found good ways to do this financially. The Senate's just digging in their heels. And I do believe that it is the Senate Finance Committee specifically working together with the rest of the Democrats in the Senate in order to create this argument. But there are some Republican senators that have made it very clear to me and clear on their votes on the House floor that they don't approve of the Senate's approach. But, by and large, they rule with an iron hand over there in the Senate Finance Committee.
We will come back with more of your calls and questions for Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore. In fact, we'll get WTOP Sprawl and Crawl reporter Steve Eldridge in here as well to talk to the governor about the Wilson Bridge replacement project in the next segment. 1-877-628-WTOP. We break for traffic. Work together. Stan Thomas in the WTOP Traffic Center. Making your trip southbound in or Welcome back to Ask the Governor here on WTOP Radio. Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore taking your calls, your questions. 1-877-628-WTOP. That is a free call. Our WTOP is a free call on Singular Wireless. And email questions by going to our website, WTOPnews.com. Bruce Allen, along with Mary Ann Jennings, and WTOP's Sprawl and Crawl reporter Steve Eldridge joins us now as well.
Governor, good morning. Back in 1997, President Clinton, after 5 years in office, signed an executive memorandum directing the use of union labor on federal projects over $5 million through project labor agreements. Now, when Maryland Governor Glenn Jennings announced last year that he wanted to use a PLA for work at the Wilson Bridge, many accused him of playing politics and paying off his union supporters. But in the first month of office, President Bush has signed an executive order or memorandum effectively rescinding Clinton's order. How big a role did you play in making that happen, and might this be considered some sort of political payoff as well?
Well, I don't have anybody to say that. Certainly my views are well known on this, but I took my action based on protecting the taxpayers of Virginia. Steve, you'll remember that Governor Gilmore and I are working very closly together on all of this, getting the money and laying the plans and working basically as partners in this all the way. And then abruptly, all those communications were cut off. And instead, the Governor Glendenning said he was going to proceed with the bridge, and we had no idea what he was doing with respect to letting the contracts or what was going on. And I became very concerned, Steve. I was very worried that there was going to be a run-up on the bridge, of money on the bridge, of costs, and that Virginia taxpayers were going to be sent the bill. So as you'll recall, I announced on this radio station Virginia's policy, which would be that we would be happy to build our section and to pay any overruns on that. But if Maryland was going to insist on no input from Virginia on what they were doing, then they would have to pay the overruns on their portion of the bridge. Now, when I took that step, Steve, I basically insulated Virginia from potential overruns in Maryland. Then a week later, the other shoe dropped, and Governor Glendenning announced that he was going to do a labor-only agreement on the bridge, which would, of course, have the effect of running up the total.
Was that a surprise?
Yes, absolutely a surprise. I had no idea that he would do anything like that.
Well, I mean, the Raven Stadium, the Fort McHenry Tunnel, most of the major construction projects in Maryland have fallen under PLAs, not all of them being union only exclusive. But why would that come as a surprise that on a $2 billion plus construction project he would support a PLA?
Because he wasn't talking to me about it. Up to that point, we had this partnership. We were discussing how we could get this bridge built and the federal funding, and he and I visited the Congress ourselves many times. We even appeared together at the White House a couple of times trying to, in partnership, work on this thing and make sure this bridge was built. Wouldn't you think that he would have said, hey, by the way, Governor, we're going to, now that we're in charge of this thing, we're going to put on PLAs and we're going to have union-only contracts. Of course, he would have known that was in violation of the Virginia law and Virginia public policy. We believe in open competition. We believe in open opportunities for working people to have a chance to participate on federal projects like that. But I had to take my steps to protect the people of Virginia no matter what.
Now, one of the requirements to getting the $1.7 billion in federal funds on this project is that Maryland and Virginia come up with a mutually acceptable financing plan and a budget.
Mm-hmm.
If you were sitting in that seat and Governor Glendenning was sitting in that seat, what would you say to him?
Which he will be on Thursday, by the way. I would say go ahead and do a financing agreement. Let's move this bridge. Virginia wants the bridge built. I have been participating in it with him ever since I was inaugurated. And I would say let's do a funding agreement. There's no problem with this. You want to build the bridge. You want to be in charge of it. And you don't want to talk to us about it. Okay, do a funding agreement in which we make it very clear that he's in charge of construction, and any overruns people of Maryland pay. And we, on our part, will do our building on our side. We will hook up. We will build our interchanges on our side, as was previously discussed. And if we have overruns, we'll pay our overrun. That's the agreement. There's no problem. If we enter into that agreement, we can move right ahead, and I think we should.
Now, both of the states have said that they would put $200 million into this.
That's right.
Maryland took their $200 and or $200 million, and it's been riding through their budgets for a couple of years now. Virginia's budgets still only account for $35 million.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the $165 million coming from? There seems to be some hesitancy to put that on the table.
No, there's no hesitancy, but there's no reason to build it into a budget at this point when the construction is years away. We'll be in a position to do that. We have said that we're going to do it. It's the right thing to do, but there's really not an issue. You're just talking about a budgeting issue here. Well, we put our money in, and furthermore, last year we have done innovative progress and put in exceedingly great deal more money into Northern Virginia all Virginia transportation, actually. So that'll be fine. But they handle their money the way they want to. And if they want to put it in their budget now, I have certainly no objection to that. But I think the responsible thing for us to do is make the commitment and then fund it as necessary.
But there seems to be some disparity between the way things are budgeted within Virginia. For example, the Dulles Rail project, the $75 million commitment is there, and it has been riding through the budget, even though that project as well is several years down the road.
In fact, I have an announcement today, as a matter of fact. I'm going to commit news, Steve. I'm going to commit news for you here today. We are just releasing an announcement today that the first phase of a private extension of the Metro Rail system from West Falls Church to the Dulles Airport has been approved by our Public-Private Transportation Act Advisory Panel. Now we're in a position to move ahead with the next step, which is to create a funding plan and to put things in place. So this is an accelerated approach that we agreed to do. And I am announcing here today that the first phase of this new project is now approved and we're on our way.
Now, you said private project.
Mm-hmm. For the public-private partnership.
Who is your partnership, and how is that going to? Who is your partnership with on the private side, and how is that going to work?
Oh, it's going to work by the same way we've done a lot of other public-private partnerships, and it's putting together a joint ownership and a joint work project together with private companies in order to construct. And I'm looking here right now. I think we've actually put probably the name of the people in here that we are working with. My eye doesn't fall on it right now, but what we're going to move ahead now is the federal environmental impact statement and begin to move ahead to the construction.
Now, that would be Steve, let me ask you to hang on for 1 second. We'll come back and talk more about this public-private partnership and the Wilson Bridge, and I know you want to mention the Beltway bypass as well. So don't go away. More to come with Governor Gilmore and transportation. Your calls, 1-877-628-WTOP. Got a break for traffic and weather together. Here's Stan Thomas in the Traffic Center.
Well, Montgomery County informs us there.
Welcome back to Ask the Governor here on WTOP Radio. Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore here to answer your calls, 1-877-628-WTOP. That's a free call, as it is on Star WTOP using Singular Wireless. Email questions by going to our website, WTOPnews.com. Bruce Allen, now along with WTOP's Sprawl and Call reporter Steve Eldridge. Just before the break, we were talking about transportation issues. Wilson Bridge, a new public-private partnership bringing rail service out toward Dulles.
As you'll recall, last year when I was in the middle of this and we were doing innovative progress and passing those new types of transportation programs, I put a special emphasis on Dulles Rail. And I just want to report today and announce today that we are moving ahead now through the first phase.
Now, might we compare this to the Greenway?
Which one?
Well,
you're talking about the Dulles extension,
which
or
is
you're
in
talking
effect
about
the extension of the Dulles Toll Road, but it's owned and operated by a private company who takes in the tolls and from which they ostensibly would make a profit.
Yes, very similar. It's a public-private partnership, but it's a way of utilizing private capital and ability to move things ahead in a faster way, and we think that the Dulles Rail needs to move ahead.
Well, that's certainly something that we're going to be talking about. I know I will be talking about it for weeks to come.
Great. There will be a special ticket for you.
Well, I look forward to it. Let's shift gears, but still talk about the Wilson Bridge just a little bit.
Please do.
Now, part of the construction of this 12-lane span is going to take 10 to 15 acres of tidal wetlands out of the Alexandria area. There is some activity down south that we haven't heard too much about here, that the state of Virginia wants to take 18 acres of land from a farmer Dr. Griffith, I believe is his name, for use of wetland mitigation, essentially swapping his land for the land that's taken away, the wetlands that are taken away in Alexandria.
Yeah, fill the wetland someplace else to make up for a wetland here, right?
Well, that's very correct. Now, but it's being done through eminent domain, which means that he's not necessarily compensated for the land. I mean, in this day and age,
well, eminent domain, a person's always compensated, right? That's what eminent domain is.
But not at fair market necessarily.
In fact, the law of eminent domain says a person is compensated by fair market value.
I will accede to your law degree.
Well, that's all right. There will be a fee for this. There will be a fee for this, but
however, they are condemning the land.
Yeah. Bottom line is that we have very extensive environmental regulations in the United States today. And if you're going to, in fact, affect a wetland, then the law is that you have to mitigate that, sometimes 2 to 1, as a matter of fact. Sometimes you have to create more wetlands someplace else than you're taking away for a project. Well, clearly we can't stop the Wilson Bridge because the available site is over a wetland, so the law requires us to build a wetland someplace else. In fact, I have proposed in Innovative Progress that we bank wetlands, that we in fact create them aggressively and have them available so that they can offset wetlands and projects, and therefore we don't have delays. But that's some legislation I'm putting in the General Assembly this year, which I think is going to pass.
And when you announced that 2 months ago, you mostly were talking about state-owned land, that it was going to be converted and set aside for that. But this seems to be a little different.
No, I didn't think that. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We can use wetlands anywhere we can get it. Usually we can acquire it, or we can eminent domain it, or we can use public lands, or anywhere you can get a wetland, you build a wetland, you can then use that to offset the taking of a wetland in order to do a construction project. The issue, Steve, is not this. This is very typical, and it's what's required by the environmental law. The issue is how fast can you do it? Because under the old way of doing VDOT work, it was very slow, very cumbersome trying to comply with these federal environmental laws. We're trying to find ways to speed this up because time is money.
Back with Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore in a moment. You got something you want to say to the governor? Here's your chance. The number is 1-877-628-WTOP. Got a break here. Traffic and the weather together. Stan Thomas in the traffic center.
Now we have